Good morning, children. Today in English in class 11, we'll continue the lesson Discovering Tut The Saga continues. Yesterday we had discussed how King Tut had been placed in his three-nested coffin, in a solid gold coffin. He belonged to an extremely wealthy dynasty, and therefore befitting his status, he was laid to rest in that three-nested coffin. But when Howard Carter found the mummy, it had got cemented to the bottom of the coffin because of the use of ritual raisins at the time of the burial. So it was a big challenge for them. They tried to force the mummy out of the coffin, but they were unable to do that. So now Howard Carter set the mummy outside in blazing sunshine, bright hot sunshine, that heated it to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. He thought that in order to loosen the raisins, which had got, because of which the mummy had got stuck to the bottom of the coffin, it had got cemented to the bottom of the coffin, he thought that keeping it out in the sun might help to loosen it, and therefore they would be able to remove the mummy or bring the mummy out of the coffin. Nothing budged. It was futile, it was in vain, because nothing budged means nothing moved. He reported with scientific detachment that the consolidated material had to be chiseled away from beneath the limbs and trunk before it was possible to raise the king's remains. So he justified his action. There was no other alternative. They tried to force the mummy out of the coffin, bring it out of the coffin, but nothing helped. Then they also tried to place the mummy in the bright sunshine in Egypt. Maybe the heat would melt the raisins, but that also did not help at all. So finally, it had to be chiseled out. The mummy, first the head had to be removed and then the major joints, and then they reassembled all his remains, the mummy, in a wooden box to conceal the damage. So that was what was done by Howard Carter. In his defense, Carter really had little choice. At that time, science had not developed so much, technology had not developed so much, so he had tried his level best, but nothing seemed to have helped him at that time. So he had to do what he did. If he hadn't cut the mummy free, that means if he had not cut the mummy free and brought it out of the mummy and prepared a list of all the contents found in the tomb and all the jewelry and the ornaments found over there, he says, thieves most certainly, that means thieves definitely would have broken in, have circumvented the guards and ripped it apart to remove the gold. Circumvented, that means they would have found a way of trying to get away from the guards so that the guards would not be able to know, and yet they would break in and take away all the riches and remove all the gold, and they would have been more rough than anybody else. In Tut's time, the royals were fabulously wealthy. So at that time, Tut belonged to such a dynasty that was very, very wealthy, and they thought or hoped they could take their riches with them. So the purpose why he was laid to rest, laden with gold ornaments, because he belonged to a dynasty that was very wealthy, and also the belief that there is life after death. So they thought that it was a belief that they hoped and they thought that they could carry their riches along with them. For his journey to the great beyond, that is his life after death, King Tut was lavished with glittering goods, that is ornaments. He was lavished, that means fully from head to toe he was covered with gold ornaments. What kind of ornaments were these? Precious collars were there, inlaid necklaces and bracelets, rings, amulets which are worn around the arm, a ceremonial apron, sandals, sheaths for his fingers and toes, and now iconic inner coffin and mask, all of pure gold. So that is what they found in the tomb. To separate Tut from his adornments, Carter's men removed the mummy's head. Now, they had tried to lift the mummy out of the coffin, that they were not able to do so. Then they tried to place it in the sun. Even the heat did not help out. So the mummy's head and then the major joints were removed from the coffin. Once they had finished, they reassembled the remains, that is the mummy, the parts which they had chiseled out. They reassembled, that means they placed on a layer of sand in a wooden box. So now the remains, the mummy was placed over a layer of sand in a wooden box with padding that concealed the damage, with padding so that it would not be known to anybody that they had caused some damage. So conceal means to hide the damage. So whatever damage that they had caused, they did not want anybody to know about it. So they placed him in a wooden box over a layer of sand. The bed where now Tut rests. So that is what Zahi Hawass found it in. Archaeology has changed substantially. Substantially means considerably in the intervening decades. That means as the decades have gone past, a lot of changes have come about in archaeology, focusing less on treasure. Earlier, archaeology and the archaeologists used to focus more on the treasures, the wealth, the gold ornaments and all that they found, and more on the fascinating details of life and intriguing mysteries of death. So earlier, the focus was on treasure, that is on the wealth, the gold and all. And now gradually there has come about a change in their perspective, and now they focus more on the emphasis is more on the details of life and the mysteries of death. Intriguing means you can say that something that arouses our curiosity or interest. So in the case of King Tut, the fact or the cause of his death was not known. So now, as the years went by, as the decades went by, the archaeologists began to focus more on this fact rather than merely on the treasures. It also uses more sophisticated tools, which did not exist earlier naturally, including medical technology. In 1968, now the first investigation was carried out by Howard Carter of this mummy, that is King Tut's mummy. Now this was the second one. This was the second scrutiny, the second investigation. In 1968, more than 40 years after Carter's discovery, after he had discovered the mummy, an anatomy professor x-rayed the mummy, right? So this was the second scrutiny. An anatomy professor who teaches medical students, he took an x-ray of this mummy and revealed a startling fact. Revealed means disclosed. Startling, astonishing. Beneath the raisin that cakes his chest, that means that the ritual raisin which had been used at the time of his burial, that covered his chest, his breastbone and front ribs are missing. So that is what he disclosed now. So this was the second scrutiny. A little more input was received. Today, diagnostic imaging can be done with computed tomography or CT. We have the CT scanning machine, by which hundreds of X-rays in cross-section are put together like slices of bread to create a three-dimensional virtual body. So the CT scanning machine is a highly sophisticated machine that enables us to observe the minutest of details, right? So that is how it helps out. What more would a CT scan reveal of Tut than the X-ray? Now, when Zahi Hawass had got this CT scan of the mummy done, what more information would they be able to receive? And could it answer two of the biggest questions still lingering about him? That means the mystery that surrounded his death persisted even today. Thousands of years had gone past, but nobody had been able to identify the cause of his death. That is, so today they thought that would it be able to help out, that will they come to know how did he die, what was the cause of his death, and how old was he at the time of his death. We knew that he was a teenager, but the age was not specified. So he says, how did he die and how old was he at the time of his death? So he was wondering that would these two big questions that still lingered about him, would these be answered? Thank you.